was suggested that we address this, effect of um, witnessing a genocide and seeking some deeper insight, seeking some deeper understanding um, as to what that looks like. So that's what this discussion is about today, inshallah. Um, but it's important we remind ourselves of why we're even here, and so I feel it's necessary to start this discussion with um, uh, where we are, what is happening in Palestine, what are the unfortunate, I hate to even use the word statistics, but what does this, look like? Ibrahim, give me a hand here one second. And so I pulled this up. This is from Al Jazeera. How do I switch screens?
Oh, stop presenter mode.
Can't you toggle it somehow?
Yeah, it's in the settings.
That's fine. You just is this being live streamed?
Yes.
I'm not the most technologically adept, so forgive me for that.
Okay. Let's scroll. Right? Or what was the window? Okay.
Okay, and I'll need to switch it back. Yes. So this is pulled from Al Jazeera. I think it's important that we uh, I don't know the right words to use. I don't know the right words to use. When you see things like this, then there's no words that can capture, what's happened. So this is from October 8th. So it's a month old. Unfortunately, the numbers are worse than what we see in front of us, and this is some of the more comprehensive material that I was just able to, on an easy search, find. Um, so 1 year of Israel's war on Gaza, not the Israel Hamas war. It's not what this is. It's Israel's war on Gaza, Israel's genocide amongst the Palestinian people. The framework is important. And unfortunately, in the media, you will not hear it framed as such. And that's part of one of the things that we'll discuss, inshallah. Uh, so this again, as of a month ago, 41,909 people had had lost their lives in Palestine, martyrs, inshallah ta'ala. That was a month ago. That's one out of every almost 50 people in Gaza. If that's not genocide, then tell me what is. Um, more than Now it must be more than 17,000 children killed, more than 11,000 women killed. 70% of the victims are children and women. Children and women, we're not even talking about elderly men and non combatants, that percentage of which is so minuscule. I was watching, you know, like one of the things that is really just um, is so troubling to me in at this moment. Um, alhamdulillah, there are Jewish organizations that are in solidarity with the Palestinians, recognize the extreme uh, brutality that is in being committed by the Israeli government, and they're calling out these things for what they are. But there are many, if not the majority, of Jewish organizations that are Zionist supporting. And so I was curious. I looked at one of our, sort of neighboring Jewish communities uh, that is Zionist, um, and I wanted to see what they present to their community as far as the narrative is concerned here. I was curious. And so it was quite disturbing. They had some guy, some senior rabbi, come on, and he says that, well, look, the combatants that were killed in this war are whatever he said. I think he said like 10% of the total population that Israel has killed were militants, right? Or Hamas and those that support them. One out of every 10 were militants. The numbers don't support that, number one. Number two, the other thing he said, he tried to compare it to UN sanctioned numbers of civilian versus militant casualty. And he said, but what Israel is doing falls below that threshold, and therefore that killing of women and children is justified. Complete garbage, complete like washing of the facts. So, anyways, this is I don't know why I mentioned that, but I something that bothered me extremely. Almost 100,000 people, if not more than 100,000 people, injured in 1 year. That is one out of every 23 people. The injuries are not small injuries. You're talking about severe injuries. Um, 10,000 people buried under the rubble, unaccounted for. There's no way in the world that they are alive. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them Jannah. 114 hospitals and clinics rendered inoperative. I mean, where you've seen the pictures, where is the infrastructure? Who is going to, those one out of 20 people that are injured, where are they being taken care of? Their care is non existent. The ambulances themselves have been targeted. The health institutions were intentionally targeted. These are not by chance, it's not collateral damage, it's intentional. 1 year later, 1,000 medical workers killed, civil defense workers killed, mass graves that you have by whom? By the Israelis um, inside the hospitals. Just trying to cover everything up. This is so disturbing. 75% of Gaza's population have been infected with contagious disease. In other words, there's no healthcare system, there's no sanitary uh, um, infrastructure. Everything, there is no access to clean water, basic medical supplies, and therefore disease is rampant. You've seen the WhatsApp um, messages about somebody from Gaza coming in, somebody coming to the airport, somebody coming for treatment. These are like, just a few people we've seen here and there that come to the local community. But you're talking about thousands and thousands, 15,000 people need to travel abroad for treatment for severe, severe injuries, amputations, and other life-threatening injuries. SubhanAllah. 96% of people have food insecurity. They don't have food. They're talking about, I was listening to the news yesterday, and they're saying that within a month's time, the whole of northern Gaza will be in a state of famine. People don't have food. People will die. People are dying, and people will continue to die from having lack of access to food. Again, much of that done intentional aid being intentionally blocked by the Israelis, and not only the Israeli government, but the Israeli civilian population too, who go and who raid the aid envoys that come to deliver food, and block them from coming in. Civilians. %95 of the population has no access to clean water. 700 water wells destroyed. Again, much of this intentional. 200 almost media workers killed. Again, an intentional targeting of people who are there to report what is happening inside so that it can't be reported to the world. 10,000 plus Palestinians are being held in Israeli prisons. And you've seen the pictures, the horrifying pictures, and this is a drawing of one of them. They're like this and worse. Absolute dehumanization of people at the worst of the worst imaginable type. Thousands and thousands being held without charge. In 1 year, Israel has dropped 75,000 tons. That means what? I'm doing the math. That means 150 million pounds of explosives on the Gaza Strip. I mean, unimaginable. This is the brother's side. This is the sister's side. This is the brother's side. This is the sister's side.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. um, an estimated $33 billion in direct damage caused by Israel's attacks. I don't know if you read that United Nations report. It said that it would take 350 years for Gaza to be built up again to where it was. And this, how do you even understand that? What is that? It doesn't even. 150,000 homes destroyed. The whole electricity network compromised. 123 schools and universities destroyed. Again, much of it intentional, if not all of it. 80% of schools damaged. I mean, look what happened in America when the pandemic hit and the chaos that ensued. This is nothing compared. That what happened in America is nothing compared to what's happening in Gaza. 750 teachers, educational staff killed. Almost 12,000 students killed. 200 archaeological and heritage sites destroyed. Much of these things are recognized by the world as World Heritage sites, let alone places of extreme important cultural and religious significance to the local Palestinian population. 600 mosques destroyed. 200 plus mosques partially destroyed. 3 churches destroyed. The whole, arts and sports infrastructure compromised, and on and on. And he said, I felt I had to show this as a precursor to talk. We all know, we all have seen, but I don't know. I don't know. When we talk about this, I don't know. So I felt we had to start with that, kind of just showing where things are. All right. So this was a little bit about what the horrors of genocide, what we just talked about. So how do we now? We take that, and then it's had its impact on us, right? It's had its impact on us, and the personal impacts. By the way, what we're going to do today, I'm going to go through this PowerPoint that I prepared, which is very difficult to prepare. Just kind of trying to wrap my head around all of this. But we'll talk about it, and then we'll open it up for some dialogue and discussion, and for people to be able to process and debrief. And at any point, actually, if there's some things that you'd like to say and you'd like to contribute or just unload, please. This is open. It's a small group, and alhamdulillah, we can do that, inshallah. So the personal impacts. Number one, seeing those numbers, and I even talking about it, you know, we feel helpless. Um, uh, it's hard to see how we're making a difference when we haven't been able to stop the genocide in real time. Doesn't doesn't mean that we don't continue to work and strive and engage, but the efforts worldwide, um, by Muslims, non-Muslims, people of all different faiths, and people, Jewish people themselves, Israeli people themselves, haven't been able to stop the genocide. That is the cold, hard truth. And so it can lead definitely to this feeling of helplessness. For many people, it has meant a deprioritizing of their own needs. In other words, um, for many people, it's difficult to honor the basic needs of our own bodies when we know the basic needs of our brothers and sisters are not being met. So some people have a hard time even eating without feeling guilty, sleeping and knowing they have comfortable homes to sleep in without feeling guilty. Um, we feel the privilege of what it is to have what we have, and then to see these images, and many people internalize that, and then causes this whole sort of cognitive dissonance that we see the lives, we see the news and the horrors that are there, and then our lives are normal. So there's this split that exists. We go about it life as normal, and uh, but we know that this is happening on a daily basis in Gaza and now beyond Gaza. Um, that a lot of times people masking their emotions, not able to express emotion of what's inside because we have to live our daily lives, right? Some people internalize this notion of like, don't you care? In other words, their loved ones and their people around them, it may be their own family members, maybe friends, maybe coworkers. Um, you feel so heavy about what's happening, and everybody else is laughing and playing and going about life, and life is so nice, and entertaining themselves in trivial ways, and then but then you're so entrenched in the news. You say, man, like, don't you care about what's going on over there? How can you be in such a happy state? And then if you find yourself in a happy state, then maybe you feel guilty about being happy to that extent. um, and especially for people, when you see people around you who are not part of the solidarity movement, who maybe don't care at all about Palestine, people at work and such, maybe even people, and that can be even more, uh, what do you call it, you know difficult to endure, when that's people in your own immediate circle, your family members, who seem like they don't care. um, the disconnection with the dominant narrative. Meaning what? Meaning that, like, look, you look at ABC News, and then you look at Al Jazeera, for example, or the news resources that you access to really show you what's actually happening, for the limited window that we have to see what's actually happening, because they're killing journalists, because they shut down the whole media industry to be able to even broadcast to us what is going on. Um, and you see the mainstream news talk about, every single time the story is mentioned, October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, October, as if the world started on October 7th. Every time talking about the war, the Israel Hamas war that started when Hamas killed 1,200 people on October 7th. That's the framework of it, but like as if that's the most important thing in the whole story. Forget about the dying and the killing and the mass murder and the genocide and the starving and the children and everything that we just talked about. So then you know that disconnect with what the mainstream media is showing and then what we know to be the reality and the infuriation that ensues, at least internally with me, how offensive that is. And then even the feeling that can come upon oneself, like, do I even belong in this society? This is what, if this is what this society is about, do I even belong here? Why? You know, you understand what I'm saying? How do you, that can be there subconsciously? Like, is this even my home? Right? That can be there subconsciously. Um, I mean, and on and on. What else? I'd like to hear from you all the personal impacts of some of these conflicts that we'll talk about the emotions and the feelings shortly. But what are some other sort of? Are there anything else that comes up for you? These struggles that you on a daily basis, like trying to reconcile this with that, and just want to pause for a little bit and see if people have anything they would like to share that's coming up for you that's maybe, you know, similar or different from what I've mentioned here. Yes, please.
Um, Thank you. This is helpful. First of all, the fact that you have this event.
We have a mic, just so everyone can hear.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for organizing this event. I think it's not just an important issue, I believe, in the lives of many, many of us. It's a central issue. It's what we think about when we wake up in the morning and what we have to, what we are thinking about when we go to bed at night and throughout the day. Um, so to have an opportunity to get together with like-minded um, people, neighbors, and community members, it's very helpful, I think, and important. Um, one of there's so many aspects of this that we could talk about, but since you asked what else, um, I um, I have this sort of interesting um, altered relationship, which is still not kind of settled with my neighbors.
Mm,
And I think perhaps others have also experienced this. Um, most of us have good ties with our neighbors. We have been longtime neighbors. You know, we've lived in the same place for many years, and we have a good relationship. Next door to us is a Jewish American family across the street. It's a Jewish American family. They've been there for many, many years. Where we have a good positive relationship and we know about each other on various occasions, etc. Um, we see each other, send over gifts, etc. It's kind of a normal, good neighbor
mm-hmm,
relationship.
mm-hmm,
But after October 7th, things kind of changed.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think in my own mind, I haven't come to terms with how do I interact with these people
mm-hmm,
um, who may sympathize. You know, they're kind of liberal Democrats and generally won't be sympathetic towards right wing politicians, and you can't get much more right wing extremists than Netanyahu.
mm-hmm,
But when it comes to Israel, there's
mm,
there's this little special place,
mm,
and to relate to that and
mm,
try to fit that in the scheme of things as far as interacting with neighbors.
yeah,
We haven't. I don't think we've found that place
yeah,
yet.
yeah,
There's just understood distancing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk much anymore. There's
Mm-hmm.
not much communication.
Mm-hmm.
We don't go out to dinner or coffee with them
Mm-hmm.
because the topic might come up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
is worth mentioning, and
Yeah.
part of this disconnection with the dominant narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking, when all is said and done, the bottom line for them is, well, I guess we had the Holocaust, and now in the wake of that, we have this, and we have a little mini Holocaust that happened on October 7th, and of course,
Yeah.
the reaction is going
Yeah.
to be somehow
Yeah.
related to that, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then Chip and I collaborate.
Yeah.
We're sorry, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow rationalizing and justifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's very, very difficult for me to swallow,
Yes.
and it affects the relationship and
Yeah.
my attitude.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
wanted to mention that.
جزاكم الله خير.
Assalamualaikum.
السلام ورحمة الله.
Just on that same vein, coworkers. Working in a school district, I work at a specific school full time, and just dealing with the personalities that I had a good relationship with, friendly, and after October 7th, like the real kind of faces kind of came out. Their comments about what they believe in a very, especially right after October 7th. I remember very clearly someone in a council meeting had said something to the extent of how they're killing babies. That narrative in the first day, 24, 48 hours, whatever nonsense they were trying to portray, and just starting to really see who people really are, and just navigating that, dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, seeing people, and um, how to manage my own emotions as I engage with them, and where to go with all of that.
Hmm. SubhanAllah. Look at that. That's so interesting. Astaghfirullah, interesting is not the right word. I mean, the relationships with people that we value and our deen teaches us to value, and we recognize where we stand as Muslims in America, and the way Muslims are viewed and different things, and we know we're supposed to maintain good relationships with neighbors. We know we're supposed to maintain good relationships with other people in our lives, co-workers and so forth, but that becomes challenged because of this. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for hosting this. I kind of relate to the first gentleman and what he said as well, the neighbor. We have a very good relationship with our neighbor as well, but we know where they stand, and we know where we stand.
Mhm.
And they did try to bring up the conversation a couple of times, and considering I have little children, I just kind of stopped it and said, I don't want to talk about this. We all have our personal views, and let's just continue to focus on our relationship and what matters here in this neighborhood.
Mm.
And, we still just kind of be civil, but they do try to sometimes bring it up. I have things in my car that hangs that's about Palestine, and I know they see it, and, but, I think they stopped at that point, and now we just we try to keep it civil, but I know it's sensitive, and they have their views, we have ours. Another thing I wanted to share was I go to fundraisers and I buy material through these fundraisers, and sometimes they make sweatshirts or things that you wear that represent the cause. And I wear it. I wear it to my son's soccer team. I wear it to just go into the market because I want people to know that we're here, and our voice is here. And there's been an incident where at my son's soccer game, a lady just out of nowhere came up to me and said, your shirt is offensive. She yelled at me in front of the crowd, and I just had showed up. This is in front of children. They're just so vocal and feel entitled to attack when I would never attack you for having your your flag. There's so many events that they host, and their flags are everywhere, especially in Woodland Hills. And you don't see us coming up and threatening you. Why are you? Why do you have this authority or
Entitlement.
entitlement to come up to somebody and tell them what you're wearing is offensive to the whole community? Who are you? I didn't know how to react. I just kind of stayed quiet and ignored her, and she walked away. But she made a scene where everybody turned around and looked at me. And so I became the outsider. And I still stood my ground and I wore my shirt proudly. I cheered on my son as he played his game.
Alhamdulillah.
And but inside I felt like now all eyes on me.
Allah keep you strong, sister. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Salam.
So actually, it's like more for my daughter. She's in 11th grade, and she goes to a school where it's like mostly Jewish community school. So she was like at the beginning, she would say like how her teachers would like wear like shirts that said I support Israel and stuff like that, and it really like put her down. And I mean, it's, I just tell her, just be strong, you know who you are, just be strong, and, what can you do. So that just, I mean, what else can and she's gotten stronger, I think, because it's been a while now. And she said even the principal would make like announcement. Yeah, she said principal made an announcement saying like, we're with Israel and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know how. I work in the LAUS district too, and I don't know how, like, that school is just different, I guess. They're like their own little community, but I don't know how, like, it just,
How are they able to get away with that?
Yeah, they can get away with it,
Yeah.
because it's like a,
Yeah.
small community. Also, they think they can just do
Yeah.
whatever they think is,
Yeah.
good, but they don't know that it's affecting other students as well,
Yeah. Allah bless you all. Thank you for sharing and your perspectives, Sister Hania. Salam, rahmatullah.
So I don't have a student at LUSD, but I do have
If you could speak into the mic, because there's a. Yeah.
I don't have resources to the Mountain Valley USD parent, but I do have friends who are part of the Teachers for Palestine group, and they have a legal team that talks to you about things you can and can't do. And them representing Israel asks to make you strong, where you can wear a Palestinian flag. But a lot of campuses are banning that and banning the word Palestine altogether. I work with a teacher at Canoga Park High School and have a problem with their organization being called Students for Justice in Palestine because they're not allowed to have Palestinian flags, stuff like that. So that should give you an upper hand if you're a casual to be an activist and you want to just fly under the radar and get through your day. Totally understand that. But if you want, I can reach out to her and let you know.
So let's talk. We'll come to some resources and stuff at the end, and you have a wealth of resources and knowledge, and
I
we're
know
gonna.
people who have
Yeah,
resources.
yeah.
I don't have any
Alhamdulillah.
myself.
I'd love to hear your break down some things that are available for us towards the end, inshallah. So,
I was listening to the first two gentlemen speak, and you as well, where you're kind of held in a community where you have to interact with people that you had positive relationships with in the past. I don't know if any of you feel this way, but I kind of love that the masks would come off. I appreciate that I know exactly who I'm speaking to instead of not knowing where they stand. I appreciate that they're very, very clear about who they are because I know who not to engage with and who not to give my energy to. I don't have a lot of energy. I don't have a lot of capacity, but the energy and the capacity I do have, I don't need to waste on people who already have their opinions fixed. We've been doing this for 75 years, right? This issue has existed before we were alive for some of us. And this past year, if people haven't changed their mind now, with everything being publicized, is it really worth our energy to engage with them? And for me, that's like, oh my goodness, I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to be unkind to you. But okay, you do your way. And having the all eyes on me gives you so much power because now they're looking at you. And now you can be active and you can be vocal and they're watching you. And you have this amazing platform that they gave you without realizing it. For us on our students' campus, I know one of the parents over here has kids on the same campus as us. There's a group of parents who are actually trying to remove any Palestinian representation of any kind. And for the longest time, because I'm paranoid, I genuinely thought the principal didn't have our best interest at heart. And when I spoke to him, he said, what do you need to do to be representative? Because it sounds like they're trying to erase the existence of Palestinians. And I'm like, that's exactly what it is. They're trying to scare us into pretending Palestine doesn't exist. And we've got this amazing platform to use their hatred by just being calm through it and letting them have their eyes on. I mean, letting them put their eyes on you, letting you have that platform you didn't have before. But that's kind of where I am. I don't have a lot of energy, so use that energy when you can. Sorry.
Thank you. No, Jazakumullah khair.
This is a good idea, going around doing talks.
Yeah. So, Ibrahim, you want to say something? And by the way, I just want to focus on how are you impacted. I want to talk about like strategies and so forth. We'll come to that, but I want people to be able to genuinely process some of the conflicts that are there in your life because of what we've been experiencing.
Just a question from the live stream. So somebody was asking, we have been inundated with many gory pictures that I feel like having a loss of empathy. I feel like I'm having a loss of empathy.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah. We're gonna come to some of that, inshallah ta'ala. Hopefully that will be addressed, inshallah ta'ala. The emotions and the feelings. This point that was just brought up right now. I'm starting to feel depleted of empathy because I've witnessed so much. I've seen so much horror. How do we digest so much suffering? The disassociating from one's emotions because of the constant trigger, because of the sadness, because of the anger, is manifesting with some people in their disconnection from family and disconnection from being connected to the suffering of the Palestinian people. Some people it manifests in just a hypervigilance over every single story and every single event. Different people it plays out in different ways, right? So I'm just stating the feelings and the emotions, and we'll talk about, how do we navigate them? How do we get ourselves to a position of wellness, of balance, and so forth. Another feeling that comes up for people is we can never do enough. And the, again, cognitive dissonance that comes up with that. Some it's intense grief, intense anger. I know I experienced both. Sadness and anger at the same time. I cannot watch any news clip or any video that even or any still picture of any type of suffering in Palestine. I can't even talk about it without, as I am right now, without tears coming to my eyes. I can't watch anything. Instantly will be triggered to sadness. I can't think about anybody who associates or sides with the oppressor without getting extremely angry. These dual emotions inside that are activated like that, and one after the other, right? And cycles through the day. I see that play out in myself. Some people are consumed by the activism. And that has potentially its own ramifications as far as balancing life responsibilities, taking care of our own family's needs, our own children's needs, prioritizing where we need to have them and what we need to be doing with them, in terms of making them whole people, rather than maybe just everything is about Palestine and we're not rounding them off in terms of teaching them about their deen and so on and so forth. And then the burnout that takes place, and with some people this manifests in, and we're going to talk about burnout and the cycle and how these things work, inshallah. Sometimes it manifests in physical sickness, in withdrawal. In other words, it's psychosomatic. You feel it, and your body feels it. And then and that leads to withdrawal, right? Because you take so much in and you didn't have the filter by which to keep life balance, and then the burnout cycle ensues. And as the questioner, I'm not able to feel empathy anymore because one has burned out, because there were not certain other things to balance out and filter the process so that they could maintain the long game. Um, any other feelings, emotions that come up for people, or anybody want to talk about any of these, how they manifest in them? And by the way, I did want to comment earlier, just only because it resonated with me what a couple of you said about engaging with, and this is not hateful rhetoric. This is about stating where we are, right? Because of the challenges I have relationships with certain Jewish rabbis in the community, in certain Jewish congregations that have, over the course of years, asked me to come to speak, and I always take the opportunity because these are opportunities to break down walls and to eliminate stereotypes and to give our perspective on things. But the maintenance of those relationships for me is very conflicting, knowing that those are people who are supporters of the Zionist machine. And so, they've reached out, and I've basically just kind of withdrawn from those, just kind of went, ghosted people, because I don't know how to reconcile both sides. I'm being honest here, right? So,
I'm just being honest, just fear, because they're employers, these are your, school, and you don't want that to come out on your family.
mm,
So you get a little bit afraid, I give people a lot of, what lost them, it's like, you're afraid to speak up because people ask you, and you're just like, not that you don't want to, but they're your employers, and, they're part of your community, and they have a lot of things that are wrong with them, and your child, and so, and you feel like, if you're intensely angry, it's gonna be taken out of context, or if you speak up, going to go to HR, that's been going on a lot. I had a coworker, she wore the kafaya, she's not even Muslim. And her father's actually Jewish, and she said right away she wore the kafaya, and, they went to HR, and now they asked her why you're wearing that, she told the truth, and they said you can't wear that. And she said, I'm your ally, I'm here. I'm there for you guys. So you're seeing a lot of, it's like a test, people are asking you what side you're on, straightforward, and
mm,
HR, and so you feel a little bit scared. Even this is being recorded, you don't know where it's going to end up and taken out of
mm,
context.
mm. SubhanAllah, real life consequences about uh, job security and livelihood, and tied to the most simple of symbols, pieces of clothing, and how offensive that is to people, and when, subhanallah, how conflicting that is in and of itself, on top of the fear. Like, wait a second, I'm just doing and then if I'm going to eliminate this small piece of in which I show up for Palestine, if I'm going to eliminate that from my repertoire, then how am I representing in the cycle that subhanallah. Yes.
Well,
Alaikum salam.
I think it's similar to fear. For me, it's a little paranoia as
Mm.
well. It's like, I didn't get this role because, my activism or my faith or whatever. It's a little bit of paranoia, which maybe it's not paranoia because it's true or not, but like there's no
Mm.
evidence behind it, right? That's one thing that I feel. And the other one is kind of,
Can you describe that a little bit when you
so like
say?
if you're looking for a job and you didn't get that job,
Mm,
and maybe it's, oh, maybe because they saw something on social media, but there's no real evidence that's the reason you didn't get it. Could have been just like you didn't do well or whatever. But like that paranoia with all the stuff going on. That's really, again, it might not be valid, but the other one is the lack of patience, maybe, because like usually when you're discussing things with people, right, it's about like getting them to your side or whatever. But like even when there's not that extreme of like they're for this, but they're like on the fence, but like there's no patience for that at this point,
right.
So like kind of lost a little patience.
Yeah. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for sharing that. Tough. Yes, please. Yes, sir.
So, there's so many points that come to mind, but I think, what I tend to do is try to step back and look at the bigger picture. Um, the Nazi propaganda minister Goebbels once said that lies told often enough and loud enough become the truth. And it's exactly that same playbook that is being followed right now by the Zionists and their allies. And it happens all over the world. Propaganda is a tool which is in the arsenal of war or colonization or anything that you want to do that you want to.
The first victim of war is the truth.
Is the truth.
Right.
So I think we need to keep that in mind, and also the fact that it took a very long period of time with efforts across the board, relentless efforts by those who are dominating the narrative. You had that point in the last slide about what is the dominant narrative. They've worked very long, very hard to establish that. And we are now struggling against that because it's operating full bore across the board. And they will whack you like the mole the moment you show up. By all and any means necessary. So all's fair in love and war, this is war, all's fair. So I think one of the things that we're having difficulty with is establishing the basic norm. Where are the norms of decency, legitimacy, what's generally considered good, what's right, what's wrong, because these are universal truths, all that stuff. So that's all sort of mangled up, and it's hard for us to go over to the neighbor or across the street or anybody and say, there's some basic norms and rules here. It's not good to kill kids en masse. Is it or is it not? So that's what's being questioned. And at that fundamental level, you get unmoored. And where do we stand? How do we then grab hold of anything that, it's a common truth, it's a common value. What's common in you? And that's a real big struggle. And I think it also manifests itself in these responses emotionally that you're talking about. Intense grief, intense anger. And then it reflects in your behavior in the environment in which you are, including your home. And so you can have turbulence even at home with, spouses, children, etc. So that is something also that we need to be able to have the tools to manage that, because it's having a deleterious effect in ways that we wouldn't want that. But it is happening.
SubhanAllah, you're saying that um, the universal human base values have been compromised, and I don't understand how the world cannot see that, and the emotional dysregulation that takes place on an individual level, because what the heck is going on? How do you how do you live? How do you see things?
Exactly. So then you get out there, you can scream at the sky or go out there and do whatever. It doesn't have that impact. So what you end up doing is cleaning it home,
Mm,
and of
mm,
course, the ensuing
mm.
problems that occur.
Yeah.
So this is another
Yeah.
aspect of
Yeah,
the
Jazakallah
reality
khair.
that you're talking
Yeah.
about.
No, thank you for bringing that up. SubhanAllah, a lot of insights, Sister Honey.
For us, the most, I don't know if this is the same for my husband, but I know for me, for sure, and he could probably attest to this, is I have a hard time, the biggest challenge is I'm able to be present and control my emotions when I'm out in public. I'm able to be on it. And then the hardest thing is the family really does struggle because I have a shorter fuse at home. I have a lot less patience at home, a lot more like, oh wait, I just need to come home and take a break and wait, the kids need this needs to happen, that needs to happen. And I've been leaning into my spouse a lot more for help with just compartmentalizing or taking a break when you get home. I think for people in the activist space, it's really, really, really hard to find moments of calm where we're able to just, that break between doing what you do and then taking a break and then coming back to be there for your family. I think that's one of the challenges that I have, and I'd love to have more guidance on that.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Allah bless you all. Allah make it easy. Allah help us to find balance.
Yeah, I'm trying to put words to the feeling, but the sense of like spiritual disappointment
Mm,
towards like myself, Muslims, Muslim leaders, just that feeling of like what's wrong with us. Sometimes I find myself kind of getting into that thought process and like consciously not wanting to like judge or not wanting to lose hope, but feeling at times where that feeling takes over in certain ways, or just really kind of being upset and directing it towards myself and you know my the Ummah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just trying to deal with that and not necessarily let that dictate my interactions.
mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay.
There's one more.
Oh, yes, please.
Somebody from the live stream wanted to mention it anonymously that the indiscriminate killing makes them feel dehumanized.
Mm, mhm. So it's a lot. I mean, we're talking about intense, heavy feelings that typically you associate with what? With trauma, with um, events that happen in life that have a deep impact on a person. That's when deep emotion shows up, right? And that's what we're talking about. So it's, I don't know what to say beyond that. I want to share a couple of things here. So we're talking about how do we ultimately one of the things that I want us to get out of today. This was an opportunity for us to share sort of what's happening with us individually in our families and so on and so forth. But I also want to talk about some of the things that are important for us to consider in terms of how do we find balance? How do we work towards a better state of wellness? Do we need to carry do the heavy emotions need to manifest in dysfunction in our lives? And that's where I think there's room for space for you know improvement and some work within us as individuals. So I pulled some information. I think one thing that's important to kind of recognize, um, you know, Muslims are not at the forefront of, necessarily at the forefront of taking action for Palestine. There's other groups that have been heavily involved, and oftentimes we just find ourselves tagging along rather than leading, right? And sometimes the methodology that those other and that's fine, alhamdulillah, if they're calling towards good, we as Muslims, we move towards any cause that is, we hold hands, metaphorically speaking, with others, when it's a common cause of good. But within the capitalistic culture that we live in, there may be certain tinges or angles to things that I think we have to pay attention to. And so this is a quote that I pulled from. This is a person. They're a climate activist, but striving for a cause. There are some commonalities. There are some things that kind of play out. And so he says here that capitalism has created the illusion that we can survive disconnected from one another and nature in concrete jungles climbing career ladders. However, the further we climb these ladders, the sadder and sicker we often become. Unfortunately, I see activist spaces perpetuate this same illusion while pretending to be different. We work long hours. Many of us sit in offices and cities fixed to our screens and struggle to get outdoors during the day. For years, I deluded myself that working more equaled achieving more. I stripped away anything that wasn't core to my work, but this made me miserable. What I take from here as it relates to our discussion is that in certain circles of activism, as it relates to speaking up for Palestine, it's about work. It's about do. Do this action, do that action, do that action. And the people that are the ones doing the action, there's no focus on them. So you understand what I'm saying? In other words, some people are more heavily involved in activism for Palestine. Some of you here on very conscious organization-based certain methodology-based ways in which you show up for that work. And so when you align with certain groups, it's about the activity. Very few people are focused on you as the individual. You understand what I'm saying? And so that can have its consequence on the individual. Now, a little bit more on this. This is again, this is an activist who is speaking from a different area of activism, but I think the sentiments still hit. Staying busy can be a better option than allowing time to feel the despair, outrage, fear, grief, paralysis, and other things that are the natural response to these images and to the possible futures we are aware of. You follow what's being said there. Staying busy can seem like I don't have to sit with all of the heavy emotion that some of the things we talked about. And so therefore I'll just do. Right? But if we don't bring these feelings into awareness, it's possible that they drive us beyond our health. In other words, if you're just constantly do, take action, send an email, contact this, show up at a protest, involved in the student encampments, going to this film screening, and so on and so forth, but you don't sit with the feelings, then what? It's possible that they drive us beyond our health and in ways that are themselves damaging. Our anger can leak out in our groups as frustration or attacks on those alongside us. Some people express that on some level. We can become driven by fear in a way that is ungrounded and out of relationship with reality. Some people express that. Unexpressed grief can solidify into places of numbness, even into sickness in our bodies. Some people express that. You follow what I'm saying? That it is very important to be in touch with ourselves and what is going on with us as individuals during this process, rather than just masking the need that we have emotionally, masking that by being more active. I need to do, I need to do, I need to do. You follow what I'm saying? So, any thoughts on that, on these couple of quotes? I want to build on this a little bit more, but if any, I'm just want to pause for a minute as well. Yes, Sister Honey. You have the mic, Ibrahim.
Um, I think, I have a lot of thoughts on that, obviously. But in particular with organizing and being a volunteer and showing up for actions and stuff. We have this conversation often about bringing more people into activist spaces because the more people you have organizing and working together, the more chances the entire group has to take breaks. A lot of people, a lot of activists feel like they can't take a step back because there isn't anyone to fill that spot. And for some time-sensitive actions, it is true. So it's really hard to back down. I was talking to a student a few months ago who faced a lot of stress because community members were coming at them and saying things like, well, you didn't do this, and your campus didn't do this, and X, Y, and Z. And this person was like, well, I can't, there's not enough people. And they felt a lot of shame with not participating in certain ways, even though they're doing, I think it's community, 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 right? You're focusing on community, you're building those relationships. If you have those relationships in place, you're able to take more breaks, you're able to share with somebody else what you're feeling, and then your organization isn't overwhelming. That's what I've been struggling with locally. Outside of the valley, we have a lot of community that works together, and it's enough that you can all take breaks, everybody takes time off, everybody goes on vacation without feeling guilty. But I feel like we're still starting off in the valley where we have to organize enough to be able to take turns. It's the wave, right? We push and then it's the ebb and flow. So we're just not having a chance to ebb because there isn't enough of that larger wave, enough people to carry that larger wave further. That's what I struggle with, and a few activists locally do struggle with as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Allah bless you for carrying the the load that more people and more of us need to be contributing towards. Okay. Just
How do you define activism? Who's an activist?
mhm. I think it's a wide open. It's a wide open term that many different things can fit under that heading. Whether that means somebody's out in the streets or somebody's behind their screen or anywhere in between, um, taking actions towards raising awareness of what is happening in Palestine, calling for the freedom of the Palestinian people on any level. I mean, I think in a very loose definition, this is one form of activism, supporting people's emotional sort of realities in their working towards, in their feeling towards and working towards the Palestinian cause, right?
So then there's a follow-up question. Is there a minimum level of action that one ought to be taking in this situation?
Yes.
So you can maybe qualify at the bottom rung as an activist?
Yes.
Or you're inactive, passive,
Yes.
maybe you care,
Yes.
you're not doing anything.
The Prophet ﷺ defines that. And he says, من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فمن لم يستطع فبلسانه فمن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان. That whoever amongst you sees an evil, let him change it with his hands, if he can't, with his tongue, if he can't, with his heart, and that is the weakest of faith. So there is a lot of grace Islamically, because those who are striving to change things with their hand, who are on the forefront, who are in going to student encampments who are at the facing risk of attempt, who are taking very more explicit actions, may look at those who are further down the line, so to speak, I don't, for lack of a better way of saying it, who are maybe sitting at home and maybe once a year will show up in person for some physical activity, right? Or who will, it takes them so much pushing just for them to sign a signature on some petition of whatever. That group is looking at that group and saying, well, wait a second, like, what's going on? But the Islamic definition, the prophetic definition says one should not be apathetic. Apathy is outside. Is you to feel is the minimum. Once you don't have feeling, you're not in the playing field at all. Now, the Prophet ﷺ also defines which level is the best level, right? What is the first level of action to take? And the first level of action to take is also going to be the riskiest rung to sit on, because now you're at the forefront and there's more that's going to be thrown back at you. And this, what we're talking about today, applies most to that group. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, but also say you're individually active.
Mhm.
You write lots of letters.
Sure.
You respond to all the petitions. You call your congressman
Sure.
or the White House every
Yeah.
other day.
Yeah.
And, obviously you don't see proportional or direct results. It's frustrating, but you keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing, many of us, is staying at that second level.
Sure.
The Prophet ﷺ says,
Yes, that's it.
you see
Sure.
something wrong, then 1, 2, and 3.
Sure.
What I,
And by the way, I would argue, depending on circumstance, right, what is 1 and what is 2 is what is more valuable. Ultimately, that's up to circumstance and context and so forth. So
exactly. But once you satisfy yourself, I think majority of the people are in this category, which is the third, hopefully the third, and not below. The third option is a no-risk option.
Mhm.
It's no risk, no response, no nothing.
Mhm.
And I've always, I've thought about that, and I don't have an answer. And I don't want to be sort of self-righteous or
Mhm.
judge people, but especially if you're living in the West, in our quote-unquote free societies with free speech, a right to freedom of association, etc., the consequences of just clicking something and speaking out, or sending out a message to your congressman, you're probably not going to face any dire consequences.
Mm.
And so, ought not we at least be at that level and expect that of people, or
So this is you bring up an important point, and I think a point of wellness in this whole realm of activism is ensuring that one is focused on what they're doing and their individual responsibility with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not having a disproportionate sort of worry about what others are doing. Because ultimately, number one is responsible with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if one has the leadership ability and the you know the ability to push others towards good, that's something they should utilize. But to get into a place where one is now becoming critical, passing judgment on others for not, then they're putting their own selves in danger from a heart perspective, how their heart is tuned perspective. Again, the Prophet ﷺ gave the criteria. 1, 2, 3. The heart is the lowest level that one has to feel. There are some people, the risk is greater up here and the reward is greater. The risk is lower here, and the reward is less, is proportionate. The the scholars, they talk about al jaza'u min jinsil amal, that the more you do, the more you are rewarded, and the reward will be proportionate, and it will be according to what it is that you do. So if we get into a space where now everybody else is sleeping, I can understand the frustration that sits there, that can be there with an individual. But when you dwell on that, that becomes unhealthy for oneself.
I mean, for a lot of people who are on the top level, the middle level, any level, whatever activism anyone does, even if it seems small, makes it safer for people who are at that top level. Making calls makes it safer for others. Showing up in the casita, if that's all you do, makes it safer for others. Even attempting to follow the BDS campaign, no matter how challenging it is, living in the U.S., doing what you can do. Yeah, everybody messes up. Amazon is very tempting. I get it. I think everybody can do something, and none of those things should be minimized because they do make it possible for other people to do more. I don't think there are any small actions, but there definitely has to be some action, and there's a lot of low-risk actions we can do.
You guys wanna go first while they go?
So my only comment was maybe not exactly related to this, but related to this quote was, some of us, like, the action is the therapy rather than just, sitting and reflecting, right? So how do you balance the need to reflect and the action, which is kind of helping with
So
the need to do something?
yes, and thank you for that. That's a good question. The action that is constantly done, that doesn't allow one to reflect upon their feelings and their awareness and find themselves and for them to sit with where they are at emotionally. I am so overwhelmed that now that negativity is playing out in my family, then that continued activism at the same level needs to be revisited, because your first priority is here. Your first priority is in your immediate circle at home. Now, this is an important point. Um, some people, they may want to justify, okay, I'm going to give less at home and I'm going to give more there, but that's more important. And yes, there is a time and place for things, but when it's done at a constant level, where there's neglect in their immediate circles, and there's harm even maybe being done in the context of home, because the energy is being spent elsewhere, then there can be a misapplication and misbalance. So the question is, the action is the therapy, but if that therapy is a maladaptive therapy, then one needs to revisit how they are, the mindset as to what's taking them to take that road and that route. You see what I'm saying?
Assalamu alaikum. So, subhanAllah, once October 7th happened, and we've been going through this for the last 13, 14 months, the people in Palestine and the emotional turmoil that we've gone through. One of the things that I noticed was um, that we are missing from the local community that we are a part of. And I was listening in, before I came in, I was listening in, and I think one of the comments was that they feel empowered to call us out, even if somebody's wearing a small. And I feel, what I realized in some gatherings I've been to, they feel empowered because they know there are other people who back them up in that gathering. When I go to that gathering, I'm the only one. I'm talking about non-Muslim gatherings, whether it's networking or work events or whatnot. So, my question, I guess, is
there, or my observation is that there is a fear of or lack of integration into the larger community for one reason or the other. And it's happened before too, but post October 7th, it highlighted that for me even more so. We're not in spaces where people are talking about it and we're irrelevant. Nobody cares. So that observation is prompting me to get out there and be in those circles outside of the activism that we have seen, which is protests or encampment, which is all important, all or debates or discussions like these. But adding to that is also some element of integration from each one of us into the community that we belong to. So just the observation.
Jazakumullah khairan. Jazakumullah khairan. Let me move forward a little bit. I just want to talk about some more of the emotional implications of things, right? To kind of have a deeper. That's what we don't sit with. That's why we're here today. I'm gonna, there's so many layers of this discussion that need to. Today, I wanted to be about a deeper emotional understanding of ourselves, the impact that this has had on us individually, and some of the things that have kind of come and because this has been rarely talked about. Look at those that are heavily engaged in activism as it relates to the Palestinian cause. One of the main sort of bodily elements that comes into play is adrenaline, right? Adrenaline is a physiological function that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed inside of us to be able to function at a higher level at points of stress, right? It's good in the short term. It's dangerous for extended periods of time. That's why the Palestinian people themselves, those are living the actual genocide, it gives them that hypervigilance, it gives them the ability to stay awake for 2-3 days on end, because you have to survive. But over the course of time, it has a extremely negative effect on the human being. And so unfortunately, the body itself complicates matters. During the initial stage, tension and excitement leads to an increase in the production of adrenaline, which may lead to a kind of euphoria or intoxication. This intoxication can be addicting and can lead to an attempt to be constantly active without allowing time for relaxation. The euphoria is sometimes followed by depression because the body stops producing adrenaline at some point after the stress feelings end. This is for someone who is engaged, go, 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 go. And these are some of the bodily consequences. Now, these are some other important points. I'm going to throw all of this information out at you. Right? Vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, and burnout. See, no one should mistake what all of this information that I'm presenting to you for saying, look, you all are doing too much, slow it down. That's not the messaging here. The messaging here is you all are doing a lot. Alhamdulillah, Allah bless you, reward you, increase you, help you to bring more people with you, but pay attention to what's going on with yourself at the same time. That's what this is about, right? Vicarious trauma is what? Is the witnessing of others experiencing traumatic events. A person, who engages in one of the helping professions, a marriage family therapist, social workers, licensed professional counselors, etc., they on a daily basis hear about the life struggles of others. They're constantly being fed that. And that can lead to a person themselves, and you're supposed to be empathetic towards what they are going through. And so you sit with them in those moments of difficulty and you try to feel the world as they feel it. But that has its impact. When you constantly watch images of others whose lives are being brutalized in every single way, that has its impact on you. And so one of the terms this is about the term that came up in the 70s. vicarious trauma, the internalization of the traumatic experiences of others. Right? It's, I'm not saying this is something we should or shouldn't do. I'm saying it's something that does happen when you engage in such. Compassion fatigue is another important to kind of recognize. This is the emotional exhaustion resulting from the prolonged exposure to the suffering of others. It's not direct trauma. This is the thing. Many of us say, well, some of us may say that the people who are experiencing the genocide firsthand, who've lost their family members, who've lost their own security, and who've lost everything, their situation is so bad. And for me, to not feel what they're feeling, how poorly that reflects on me. So I need to feel as much as I can feel of what they feel. I need to be as connected as. And when one does that, what can happen is this thing called compassion fatigue. It results from an empathetic engagement with others' trauma, where the helper's ability to care diminishes over time due to emotional depletion. That is the what's the word? The dilemma of the whole thing. What's the word? That's the dichotomy, thank you, of the whole thing. I need to be connected with my brothers and sisters are feeling. But when you do that, without certain filters, without certain practices in your own life of self-care and taking care of your own needs, then the consequence can be the opposite of what you desire. You follow what I'm saying? And so what is that? So what is it? This highlights the critical importance of maintaining personal well-being to continue effectively supporting others. That's the point, right? That's the point. The extreme manifestation of this is what? Burnout. Burnout is the culmination of chronic exposure to stressors leading to physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism. I know something that's a quality I display when it comes to media and the world, and then a sense of reduced accomplishment. Some of the risk factors, what's the result? They include neglecting personal needs, isolating oneself, skipping meals, and inadequate hydration, insufficient rest, and so these may seem like small things. Like, well, what's a big deal? Like, I'm just doing this to myself, but the people in Gaza, they're losing their lives. So what does it mean if I don't drink enough water every day, or if I eat one less a meal, or if I sleep a little bit less because I need to go and do this and that? But there's a physical what do you call it, consequence on oneself, physical and emotional consequence, psychological perhaps, on oneself. Okay, I will talk a little bit more about burnout. It's more than just being tired. It's something that can have long-term effects. It results in exhaustion. That's the individual stress component. It can manifest in cynicism. That's the interpersonal component and how you deal with others. A negative, callous, or excessively detached response to various aspects of work and life. And then inefficacy, the self-evaluation component. There is a feeling of a lack of achievement and resulting doubts about self-worth. It's a complex thing that manifests in complex ways. Now, this is kind of practical for you to kind of look and evaluate and see yourself. Today is about yourself. Today we're talking about yourselves within the context of the genocide. And it's okay for you to talk about yourselves and think about yourselves and contemplate and have a greater level of self-awareness. A lot of people don't allow themselves to go to this space that we're taking you today because, well, I need to think about them, about my brothers and sisters. But if you're not paying attention to yourself, then you can't take care of them. You guys know the analogy that they always use when it comes to taking care of yourself. which is what? The airplane, and you have your child sitting next to you, and there's a state of emergency, the oxygen mask. You don't put it on your child first because you're going to pass out in the meantime if there's no oxygen. You put it on yourself first, and then you put it on your child. And so today, this is what we're talking about. You will not be able to continue in your activism. You will not be able to be effective in your families as a father, as a mother, as a husband to your optimal if you don't take care of yourself and do some level of self assessment and try to achieve a higher state of self awareness, so that you can continue to advocate for the freedom of Palestine. Okay, so this model, it shows, this is a cool model I pulled up. I thought it was really nice. It just captured everything, right? The burnout spring. How does this happen? What? So, and where do you sit on this? These are 5 different levels. One is that you're feeling fine. You take care of yourself. You go out for your walk every morning for an hour. You go to the gym once a day, once every couple of days. You make sure you get enough sleep. You eat well. You have good family interactions. You do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself. When there is adrenaline fueled activism, self regulation is relatively easy because your body is in a state of general wholeness. Look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One time, his uncle Al Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu comes to him and he says, Ya Rasulullah, alimni shay'an as'alahu Allah ta'ala. He says, teach me something that I can ask from Allah. The Prophet ﷺ says, Salillahi al-afiyah. He says, ask Allah for wellness, wholeness, completeness. The uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, he's relating the hadith, he says, I sat with that for some time, and then I came back to the Prophet ﷺ, and I asked him the same question, teach me something that I can ask from Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Ya Abbas, Ya Ammi Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Look how he talks to him. He's like talking to him directly. Ya Abbas, oh uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He says, Salillah al-afiyah fi dunya wal akhirah. He says, ask Allah for afiyah, for this wholeness, this completeness. This is this first level we're talking about in this life and the next life. Okay? And so this is where we want to be. Some people justify to themselves, well, I'm at these other levels, but at least I'm doing therefore work, and that advocacy is important. But that level of functioning is not sustainable, is not going to ultimately hold the line. So anyways, you look at yourself, a bit stressed, on edge in relationships, communications, high stress for a continuous period, lots of adrenaline-fueled activity, difficulty sleeping, feels like the brain is not working properly, or you're irritable, snappy, burnout, feelings of having no control, resenting activism, health issues, and breakdown. Right? Measure yourself. Where are you? Now, what are some of the symptoms of each of these different levels? Feeling fine. Those are the things you're doing. You're living life well, right? A bit stressed. You have a shorter fuse at home. Some people express that. Own work feels Own work seems too slow or not good enough. I'm not sure exactly what it's saying there. Start to drop off self-care practices. Your regular exercise routine, other routines have fell off a bit. Feels like I'm not doing enough. That part is okay from a certain extent. From an Islamic perspective, it says, feels like I'm not doing enough. We ask Allah, Ya Allah, I'm not doing enough for the people of Palestine. Ya Allah, forgive me for not doing more for my brothers and sisters. That's okay with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it starts to become a emotional, psychological internalization, that can be problematic. High stress, there are some of the what do you call it? Markers, and then there's some of the markers of burnout. You can read them through. I want to sit for the last 10 minutes or so and kind of discuss through some of these things get people's thoughts, hear from you all. I talked a little bit much in this last section, but I wanted to show you this sort of paradigm. Any thoughts from people? Yes, Sister Khan. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I'm right now alienated
Get
from
it.
I'm alienated right now from everybody in my family
Mm,
and my sons and
mm,
everybody, you know, in that other, this other world that I live in. I don't have family to go home and feel like, um, um, I, it feels like a different situation for me than what I'm seeing. And especially just very recently, this business with Amsterdam, um, I'm like really shocked and hurt at the way I'm hearing people respond. And they respond, I hear them responding very openly in a way that maybe y'all don't. And the things that they're saying are just devastating to me. And these are people that are supposed to be family and loved ones and lifelong friends. And it's, we all say that October 7th made everything different. And um, that's, I raced to get here. I was listening to it online in the car. And I don't know. I just needed to be with what I feel like is my family.
yes.
And thank you for being here and doing this.
Allah bless you, Sister Connie. Allah bless you tremendously. You're saying, if I may interpret for some people who may not have caught on to what you're saying, if you don't mind, you're saying you as a white woman, you hear comments much more directly that are negative towards Palestinians, towards Muslims, because they're not going to say that to me as a brown person who they know is somebody different and so on. And so you hear those things and that sits with you heavy, knowing what you know to be the truth. And yeah, yeah, Allah bless you. Allah bless you. And we are your bigger family. You know that. You know that. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. In fact, you give us inspiration and strength.
Allah.
Because we can't imagine what it must feel like being in your situation. And it's, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, in the Quran that He places trials and tribulations and burdens on you, but then He gives you the strength and the capacity, the capability to bear those. It's, you are never burdened with more than that which you can bear. So, and you're bearing a lot. So, mashallah, that's your tower of strength and an inspiration to the rest of us. And may Allah be with you and keep giving you that strength and fortitude to take this struggle and succeed in it. So, and I can relate to it a little bit because there's a very good friend of mine who lives in Woodland Hills and really friendly, gregarious guy with knows the neighborhood, popular. And we were talking about neighbors earlier. This gentleman has a very good friend and a neighbor who is, you know, Jewish American and a professional person, generally liberal, etc. But when October 7th happened, obviously there was some distancing. People didn't talk as much about sensitive issues. The other day I got an email from him, from my friend, saying that he just sent out a general sort of what's happening on a human level can be relayed. You know, obviously it's tragic. So many people are being killed, kids are being killed, and etc. And the reply he got back from this other person was, what you're saying is total garbage. We have a right to, from the river to the sea, to have a 100% state with the, ethnocentric or ethnocratic state. And everyone who lives there, either they move out or we will kill them all. They all need to die. This was stated point blank. He just copied the email and sent it to me. And this is not a sentiment that's uncommon.
Yeah.
It's very widespread.
Yeah.
And I think most people know Gideon Levy. He's a correspondent at the Haaretz newspaper. If you haven't seen, just watch his, view his clip on YouTube or Instagram. And if you want an explanation of where does this thinking come from, how do human beings justify this behavior and this belief in wiping people out, there are 3 points that he gives, and listen to those very carefully. And that's what we're fighting. That's what we're dealing with. It's very deep, it's pervasive, it's rock solid, and that's what we're dealing with.
Yes, Numan, please.
Jazakallah khair. When this program was put together, I've been on the go for the most part of my, the last so many months. Just looking at this, trying to figure out where do I fall, I don't know, because I haven't really unpacked my emotions. I've just been doing. So when you ask me that question, is there a guideline to unpack, figure out where I'm at?
I think only because you asked it, I'll just share this last piece here, and I do recognize our time is just about up. This is just another sort of rubric to look at this with, right? Finding that balance. It's interesting, by the way, throughout when we were talking today about this reality, many people resort back to talking about the dynamics of the genocide because they are so disturbing because of the way in which some of the hate that is out there, and we resort talking back to because that's natural. That's what we know, and the information every time it hits us, we want to go back to that, and then we tend to deflect away from this. That's the tendency, right? And that's the whole challenge. That's the dichotomy of this whole thing. If you understand what I'm saying. So, anyways, looking at this, trying to find this balance, right? Time spent stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. I don't claim to fully understand the physiological terms that are used there, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, but one is, you're giving time, energy, money, commitment, and attention. Then are you receiving an equivalent amount of appreciation, connection, warmth, money, care? The action that you take, you go to meetings, you projects, building, growing, you engage in activism in different ways. Do you get an equivalent amount of rest, downtime, silence, solitude, socials? Amount of talking that you do and going out and emailing, are you listening equivalently? The amount of doing that you're doing, pushing to get things to happen, are you just letting yourself be in the world? Focus on work, using will, focus on relationships, care, and connection. So the two sides have to be balanced. If there's too much going on this left side, and you're not refueling on the other side, that's where the imbalance can take place, and that's where a person can feel depleted and in those, lower down this scale, right? And so hopefully today was just a means of increasing our level of understanding that we need to know ourselves better. The fifth rightly guided Khalifa, Sayyidina Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he has a beautiful saying. He says, "Rahim Allahu imra'an arifa qadra nafsih." That may Allah's mercy be upon a person that understands themselves, their limits, their capacities, their abilities, and so forth. May Allah's mercy be upon that person that knows themselves. I don't know if it's a Greek saying, "Know, you man, know thyself." Right? It's the same. It's a similar concept. Um, we need to understand ourselves. We need to be more aware of our emotions, our capacities. So for some people, that may sound like hokey pokey, like, you know, what kind of language? Like, what is that? No, that's part of ensuring that we are going to be able to continue to do the work. We're going to continue to be able to act, to be active and contribute, and to be have a meaningful space and place in this world. And the higher you are up on that level of activism, as we said, those who speak, those who take action with their hands, those who speak with their tongues, those who hold it in their heart, the higher level the further you're up, the more you give, the more you need to receive for yourself as well. So hope that this was a beneficial session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our shortcomings. May Allah forgive us for our shortcomings towards our brothers in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to be from amongst those that the Prophet ﷺ described as when they see an evil, they change it with their hands. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be used by Him, and may He not replace us. Allahumma sta'milna wa la tastabdilna ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم فرج عن إخواننا في فلسطين يا رب العالمين. Ask you, Ya Allah, to give relief to our brothers in Palestine. Ask you, Ya Allah, to give them food, to give them shelter, to give them fight and resolve and patience, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ask you, Ya Allah, to destroy those that seek to destroy our brothers, Ya Akram al-Akrameen. Ask you, Ya Qawi, Ya Aziz, Ya Jabbar, to take revenge upon the people of Palestine, those who have no means, no food, no shelter, no ability to defend themselves, and yet they still get taken advantage of. They get brutally massacred. All of their institutions are destroyed. We ask you to defend them, Ya Rabbil Alameen, for we have no power, we have no ability, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and you are upon all, you have control over all things. Ya Qawi, Ya Aziz, Ya Jabbar. Ask you, Ya Allah, to forgive us our shortcomings and to overlook our sins and our faults. And we ask you, Ya Allah, to help us to be means of support for each other. Ask you, Ya Allah, to help us to know ourselves better so that we may always be able to contribute to the ummah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ask you, Ya Rabbil Alameen, to give us afiyah. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-afwa wal-afiyah, ya akram al-akrameen, fi ad-deen wal-dunya wal-akhirah, ya arham al-rahimin. Ask you, Ya Allah, to give us afiyah, to give us wholeness, to give us completeness, to make us uh, well and give us wellness at all times, Ya Akram al-Akrameen. And we ask you to give the same to our brothers in Palestine, to our brothers in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Lebanon, and everywhere that Muslims are struggling and suffering, Ya Akram al-Akrameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.